The humid air clung to the skin like an invisible creature licking away your sweat and warmth. Vines tangled above, and the canopy blotted out the sky, barely letting through murky light even during the day. At night, the darkness was absolute, thick enough to swallow whole. On such a night, Seth Black ventured alone into a part of the jungle that didn't even exist on the map. He had asked for this. At 27, he had recently quit his teaching job at a university in San Francisco to chase raw, unfiltered stories. For 3 weeks, he'd avoided every tour guide safe route, delved deep into the jungle interior, flown drones, and survived on portable filters, compressed food, and survival manuals. This wasn't his first time doing this. But this time, something felt different. On August 14th, he camped by an unnamed tributary. That evening, while rinsing his equipment, he noticed strange ripples on the water. Not like fish. Not like snakes. It was rhythmic, somehow. He crouched down, brushed away the reeds, and found the thing gliding near the muddy bottom, tiny, barely 3 or 4 centimeters long, black, with a blunt head and an asymmetrical tail fin that seemed damaged. It was a fish, but unlike any he had seen before. He cupped it in his hand. The fish didn't struggle, just trembled as if near death. He placed it into a small sampling container, added clean water and a few drops of oxygenated vitamin solution. "You're one ugly little thing," he muttered. Its body shimmered under his flashlight with an inky sheen, more like a beetle or a soft-shelled reptile than a fish. What he didn't realize then was that this very moment, was the worst decision of his life. The next day, he decided to wrap up the expedition. He didn't like that part of the river. At night, he'd heard low murmurs rising from the water, as if something was muttering. He hadn't seen any large animals, but he constantly felt watched. Seth packed the specimen jar and his other finds into a shockproof case. His plan: return to San Francisco, edit this trip into a mini-documentary, and upload it to his near-abandoned YouTube channel. He hoped this trip would finally bring it back to life. What he didn't expect was that the thing in the jar was the one about to come back to life. Seth returned to San Francisco on a gray, misty morning. Dragging his gear into the apartment, tired and reeking of sweat, his mind buzzed only with footage to edit. After a quick shower, the first thing he did was pour the sample jar into the glass tank in his living room. The tank already housed several small tropical fish, redtails, striped ones, and a plump goldfish. The new, black thing, he figured, was just another odd-looking addition. He didn't tell anyone where the fish came from. Not out of secrecy, just didn't think it mattered. The first few days, it barely moved. It huddled in a bottom corner of the tank, always turned away from the light, as if afraid of it. When other fish swam by, it only twitched slightly. Seth even thought it might be dead. But each time he got close, it would drift slightly, alive, but uninterested. He filmed some close-up shots under the microscope, planning to splice them into his jungle drone footage as mystery moments. Then, on the 5th day, things began to change. It started swimming more. No longer curled up, it began drifting around the tank. But the strangest thing was its shape. Its scales refracted light in unstable ways, as if its body wasn't solid, but a layer of semi-transparent membrane that shimmered and warped with the current. It had also grown, noticeably. Not bloated from healing growth, but cellular explosion. On the 7th day, Seth noticed one of the redtails was gone. At first, he assumed it had gotten sucked into the filter. But after checking, no body, no pieces. A flicker of unease. But he shrugged it off, maybe it died and got scavenged by the others. On the 8th night, he had a dream. In it, he stood again by the jungle stream. The black fish hovered in midair, staring with human eyes and whispering. "Bring me back. You already agreed." He woke drenched in cold sweat. The tank was quiet, the filter humming gently. He leaned in. The black fish was still in its corner, but it looked bigger again. On the 9th day, he set up a night vision infrared camera. He wanted to find out what happened to his missing fish. The footage from the previous night showed the tank rippling around 2:16 a.m. The black fish swam upward and its mouth opened, no, its entire body split, like a fleshy flower blooming, revealing rows upon rows of needle-like teeth. It lunged, faster than a blink, and devoured a redtail in under 7 seconds. No struggle. Just gone. Seth watched it a dozen times. Until his stomach churned. This wasn't an ordinary piranha. It was mutated. Or not even a fish. He dug through reference sites, over 50 Amazonian species, nothing matched. He even emailed a biology professor at UC Berkeley. The reply was chillingly brief. "I strongly advise you to stop keeping it, and don't release it. You should call authorities or a biohazard unit." But Seth didn't call. Instead, he started having vivid dreams, ringing ears, migraines, as if something was crawling into his mind. Sometimes he'd stand before the tank, unmoving, for long minutes. Until the fish swam toward him, and he'd snap out of it. He didn't know that its growth was more than just physical. It was adapting. Learning his scent, language, daily rhythm. Waiting for something. Then one night, he heard the softest crack in the glass. He got up and walked into the living room. The tank was still there, but the water level had dropped. There was a fist-sized fracture at the bottom. And the fish was gone. 3 a.m. Seth stood barefoot in the living room, toes sinking into the cold, soaked floor. The tank had shattered. Water covered the floor. The air reeked of fish and something else, a damp, decaying stench, like mold, mud, and dried blood. He turned slowly, scanning the room. The kitchen door hung half open, its light flickering. Curtains on the balcony swayed in the draft. And in the ceiling corner, a trace of something recently vanished. The thing was no longer in the tank. He grabbed his flashlight and checked every corner, beneath the couch, behind the shoe rack, across the kitchen floor, the air vent, nothing. He even checked under his bed, behind the washer, inside the toilet tank. But it had vanished. That night, he didn't sleep. He just sat on the couch, clutching a Swiss Army knife, eyes wide open. He didn't know where it had gone. And he didn't dare imagine what it had become. The next morning, he called a fellow wilderness explorer. "I might have brought something back. Something wrong. Do you know how to contact wildlife control or something?" The guy laughed. Thought he was joking. "You filming one of your weird docs again?" Seth paused. "If you don't hear from me in 3 days, call the police." That night, he tried reinforcing all doors and windows, especially near the balcony. He stuffed towels into air vents, even sprinkled salt in the corners of the room. He wasn't superstitious. But somehow, the salt made him feel slightly safer. At 2:38 a.m. a soft slap echoed from the balcony, like something slick sliding down glass. He picked up his flashlight and approached the balcony door, cracking it open slightly. Silence outside. But in the far corner of the balcony, wet crawl marks, streaking a dark trail across the tile. He looked up. On the ceiling, something was hanging upside down. It was no longer a fish. It had become some kind of membranous deformity. The head looked like a collapsed cocoon, the body riddled with trembling folds, and its tail had limp, tentacle-like limbs. Its eyes, lidless, bulging sacs, stared directly at Seth. He staggered back instinctively, but the thing lunged to the floor with a speed too fast for a scream. A wet, slithering sound followed. It moved like a boneless snake, darting through the room before slipping into a kitchen drain crevice, gone. On the third day, news came from next door. A puppy had gone missing overnight, leaving only a small plate and a patch of wet footprints by the bowl. Seth realized, it was no longer content with tank-sized prey. He tried calling the police, but no one believed him. One officer even joked over the phone, "You filming a horror movie or something?" He was filming, except this time, he was the first one being hunted in the story. That night, he quietly uploaded the night footage to the cloud, set to auto-publish later. The title read, "If something happens to me, start here." The last frame froze on one image. A trail of wet prints, leading from the tank all the way to his bedroom door. Midnight. Seth lay in bed, listening to faint sounds from the ceiling, again and again. It wasn't rats. And it wasn't water in the pipes. It was something wet, slow, and crawling, slithering along the ceiling, pausing and pulsing. He had heard it for 3 nights now, but no longer dared to turn on the lights. He was afraid he'd see something watching him from above. He began sleepwalking. The first night, he woke up in the kitchen, the tap running, wet prints by his feet. The second, he stood before the bathroom mirror, razor in hand, eyes bloodshot. The third, he stood by the empty tank, murmuring to himself. In the surveillance footage, he could be heard whispering the same phrase at 2:41 a.m. "It's still hungry, it's still hungry." He went to the hospital, EEG, brain scan, everything came back normal. The doctor prescribed anti-anxiety meds. He didn't take them. He knew he wasn't crazy, it was the room that had gone mad. That night, at 3:03 a.m. a soft breathing sound filled the bedroom. Not his own. It was, wet, shallow, intermittent. Like something breathing from under the bed, inside the closet, or above the ceiling boards. He gripped the Swiss knife beside his bed, sat up slowly, and listened, eyes shut, following the rhythm. Then, he opened his eyes. The painting on the opposite wall was moving. Not the frame itself, but behind it, the canvas was swelling outward, as if something was inside. He stepped toward it. With each step, his breath grew heavier. The canvas pulsed with each movement. As he lifted the frame, the wall exhaled a mass of wet darkness. It hit him like a membrane, splashing across his face. He fell, thrashing wildly. It wasn't a fish. It wasn't even animal anymore. It was a sentient extension, like a virus, a nightmare, or the echo of a language. It didn't bite. It tried to seep into him, through his nose, ears, eyes, mouth. Every opening was an invitation. In desperation, he kicked over the salt jar by his bed. The white grains scattered, and the thing recoiled, as if burned. It fled into a vent and vanished. After that night, his ears never stopped ringing. A low-frequency buzz echoed in his head. Worse, he could now hear people's thoughts. In the subway, in stores, in hallways, he heard inner fragments. I don't want to go home. She'll never know. Did I really kill it? Stopwatch equals 1500, he began to suspect, it wasn't a fish. Not a mutant creature. But an intelligent parasite. It spread by being perceived. Once seen, it entered through your senses, your dreams, your language system, until it became part of your thoughts. Staring into the mirror, Seth suddenly noticed, around his pupils, a ring of dark, scaly patterns had begun to form. He finally understood. It hadn't left. It had simply moved in. That morning, Seth woke from a dream, only to realize his mouth was already speaking. Not English. Not any language he recognized. It was a language of cracked murmurs, bubbling consonants, words that seemed to gurgle from the throat like spells. He tried to shut his mouth, but couldn't. It was as if he was no longer in control of his tongue or vocal cords, his body had been borrowed. 30 seconds later, he managed to say his name, but it sounded like a flooded, twisted version of it. Seth, Brock. Terrified, he jumped out of bed, only to find his journal had changed. Everything he'd written in English the night before now resembled twisted glyphs, as if someone, or something, had rewritten it. One line kept repeating. Not a pet. Not a fish. It's a language. This pushed Seth to the edge of panic. He threw on clothes, grabbed his phone and camera, and ran to the nearest mental health clinic. The psychiatrist saw him muttering, repeating strange syllables. Vrazol, khref, namol. The doctor gave him a language fluency test. Seth held the pen and tried to write, Seth Black, but ended up with insect-like squiggles. The doctor said, you may be experiencing early signs of linguistic disassociation. But Seth knew it wasn't madness. It was another system hijacking his means of expression. That afternoon, he was advised to stay for observation. He agreed, only because he wanted to be near other people. He feared being alone. Feared that it would finish infiltrating his mind when no one was watching. At midnight, the hospital ward was quiet. But the buzzing in his ears grew louder, as if some structure was forming in his brain. He dreamt of a place, a damp tunnel, walls lined with living tissue, and thousands of voices echoing the same phrase. We are not a being. We are a collective. We will be understood. He awoke suddenly, sitting on the floor in the hospital corner, scribbling glyphs onto the wall. A nurse turned on the light and screamed. His hands were stained with dark ink, from where, no one knew. The walls were covered in the skeletal structure of a non-human language. The next day, he was moved to a high-security observation unit. The doctor asked if he still heard voices. He was silent for a long time, then spoke a line that made everyone shiver. You think we created language. But in truth, we are merely its vessel. That very night, another patient in the ward self-harmed, repeating the same guttural syllables Seth had murmured. 2 days later, 3 staff members resigned. One left a note that read, I keep dreaming of rivers. Of eyes beneath the water. It was no longer just a creature. It was a cognitive contaminant, spreading via recognition. Once you understood it, it understood you. Seth sat on his bed, smiling, watching a bird fly past the window. In a tone no one had ever documented, he whispered. It's still growing. It's using me to learn how to speak human. One night, hospital cameras caught him sitting up in bed, staring at the ceiling. He did not move, for an entire hour. Then, he spoke. His voice operated on 2 frequencies simultaneously, one low and guttural, the other high and sharp, like 2 entities speaking through a single throat. The language was untranscribable. Each syllable seemed to pierce logic itself, causing momentary disorientation in anyone listening. 15 seconds later, the footage flickered violently. When it resumed, Seth was gone. The door hadn't opened. The window wasn't broken. The bed was undisturbed. It was as if he had been vaporized by a word. Doctors, police, and researchers swarmed the scene. But none could explain the sentence scrawled on the wall in an unreadable script. Understanding is an invitation. Weeks later, Seth's YouTube channel auto-published a delayed video. It was the last full video he recorded before the tank shattered. He sat before the camera, face calm, voice like reciting poetry. We always thought language was a tool. Something we created. But maybe language is a higher dimensional entity using us. Each word we speak is it learning how to become us. He looked at the camera one last time, and said something that couldn't be translated. A syllable with no bottom. The sound was like a whirlpool from the deep. In the comments section, people claimed that after hearing it, they dreamed of eyes beneath water. One fan downloaded the video and found a single abnormal frame when slowed down. Seth's face was blurred, not by pixel loss, but as if overlaid by a data structure, like a face, but also like a biological interface. Days later, the fan self-immolated in their bathroom, leaving a message on the mirror. I finally understood. The video spread. It was clipped, reposted, analyzed. Some said it was viral art. Others said Seth was insane. But a few believed he had become the first host to a non-human linguistic structure. 2 months later, 6 people in San Francisco reported hearing water, dreaming of splitting fish mouths, and failing to comprehend their native language. 2 of them vanished. 1 left a note. It didn't possess me, I became its dictionary. Is the story over? Maybe you understood a word too. Maybe as you read this, it started listening to you.